Hello, welcome back to the Modern Education Radio Hour here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. This is the show where we dig into everything from current research trends to far-out ideas concerning any topic even remotely related to education. I'm your host, Ben Woodford, here in the studio, and I'll be with you every Friday from 3 to 4 for the commute. Here at Modern Education, we bring cutting-edge ideas, philosophical discussions, insights from experts, and just about anything else you want to know. The goal is to help listeners interact with and understand learning in all its various forms. If you have questions or suggestions for future shows, you can tweet at BenWoodford1 on Twitter. I'll do my best to include your ideas in future shows. You can always call into the station as well or text at 855-723-9010. So we're going to get started and just kick it right off today. I'm very excited to have our guest in the studio. Cathy Williams is the co-founder of YouCubed here at Stanford. She is a very experienced and thoughtful educator with many years of varied kinds of experiences within formal education, and I'm sure plenty of those are outside of formal education too, so we'll be excited to hear all about the unique perspectives she's bringing to our educational discussion today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Cathy in and have her introduce herself. Cathy, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Ben, it's great to be here.
All right. So, Cathy, if you could just maybe start and tell us a little bit about what you're doing currently and maybe how you ended up where you are now.
Oh, wow. And we have an hour? No.
Take your time.
Yeah, what I'm doing currently is I'm co-founder and co-director of YouCubed, which is a center within the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University. And it's something that we created in 2013 outside of Stanford, and then and the co-director and co-founder, other co-director and co-founder is Joe Bowler, who is a professor here at Stanford. So eventually it became a center pretty quickly into Stanford University. And what I do today is I work beside Joe. Our goal really is to provide resources and information to teachers, parents, students, everyone out there about what we know today from research about mathematics learning and mathematics teaching, making sure that we really bring research to practice.
Wow, such an important goal. So would it be fair to say you are a full-time mathematics reformer?
Yeah, I'd say it's a 24/7 job. You know,
Excellent.
YouCubed has quite a bit of reach, so it doesn't... It's over around the world today. There's over 140 countries that are following us, people in them following us, and we've gotten a lot of traffic. It's growing. We call it a revolution. It's growing fast.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and I've got enough experience. I actually am an advisee of Joe Bowler, so I have a fair amount of experience, fair disclosure for the audience. But I'm really excited just to hear, first of all, how you got to where you're at, and just think a little bit. I know you've designed curriculum and been a coach and worked in a lot of different roles within school communities. I wonder if you could tell us specifically some of the lessons that you learned through that experience of working with students and teachers before coming to this role.
Yeah, you know, I have my background is 18 years of classroom teaching and in mathematics, and I was a high school math teacher, and 15 of those years were spent in the same district, the district that initially hired me and gave me that first job, which was wonderful. But I think, you know, it started there and started early on with I wanted to be a high school math teacher because I had loved my high school math classes, and I loved doing the college degree at the university. And I just wanted to continue doing that for the rest of my life. Today, that's made me really question, because coming into teaching in the beginning, I realized, wait, there's students out here that don't feel the way I do. And I started really trying to pay attention to that. And that made me really question what we're doing, and also question myself and do a lot of reflection. But the one thing I would say to people is dream big. I think I'm sitting here today 32 years in after a 28-year public education career, and I can't tell you how many times I've been told in my life that you can't do this. Whatever this might be. You'll never be an administrator above a coordinator level because you've never been a site principal. And you know, I've been given a lot of things like that really have all not been true. Maybe it's because I haven't listened.
Well, I'd say that's in your best interest and all the people that you've touched along the way. But usually when people have, my own personal experience is usually when people have those limiting beliefs, it's more has to do with them than it has to do with you. They don't see the possibility for themselves, so they have a hard time seeing it for others. And that's sadly prevalent in a lot of leadership positions. So I'm glad you're giving that perspective to our listeners.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And we sometimes, I think we always should question, what am I hearing versus really what's the intent behind those words. I found that to be one of the most useful things I've done as I work beside teachers in a coaching role or as a math administrator. That's another amazing thing in my life. I've been able to, my 10 years of math administration, I got to fully focus on mathematics curriculum. I would wish for anyone that desires to do this to look at the county offices. For me, people ask me, how did you come up with this at YouCubed and how are you able to do this job? Well, my work at the County Office of Education System as a mathematics coordinator prepared me so much for this job that I have today. I would recommend anybody seeking something other than site administration. If you're looking for curriculum work, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And now there's a lot of districts hiring math administrators.
Oh, yeah. Well, math is such an important piece of the educational paradigm. It's amazing to have any part in that. You can always find work, I think.
It's definitely, when I watched in those early months as YouCubed took off around the world, and we use MailChimp to get out our newsletters. And on that first newsletter that Joe Bowler and I sent out, I stayed up all night watching the map light up as people around the world were interacting. And, it woke me up to thinking this math piece is really a challenge around the world. We're not alone here in the U.S. in our challenge. I don't think there's anybody out there that can say they actually have it and they have the answer.
Yeah, and that's the nature of such a complex problem is there is no answer. There's no silver bullet, as my old principal used to say regularly. It's always a process of refining and re-refining our work. But that actually brings me to one of my first questions that I'd really love us to think about for a few minutes and discuss is if you were sitting down with a new teacher or a dedicated seasoned teacher that said, okay, I'm ready to take the plunge. I'm ready to do something different. I'm ready to really bring in these reform efforts and these, research-based practices into my work, but I don't know what to do or where to start. What would you set them off doing as their first steps towards really bringing these ideas into their classroom?
I really think that, and it goes along with math, so maybe this is a little bit of a long answer, but oftentimes we sit children down and we say, here's the script and here's what I want you to do, just do what I've done. And that hasn't worked in learning mathematics for most people, and I'm not sure for anyone really. I think it's the same way then, the approach that I take with teachers in that aspect. It's like, what really grabs you? Where's your passion? What resonates with you? And some of the work, I've had some teachers say, well, I'm really curious about technology. Well, that's a great path to follow. And then I think the big thing is to be learning, get more information, find out, more, learn more about the research. How do you think it applies? Others, have said, I really am curious about writing more in mathematics and reading within mathematics. So I think it's thinking of the research and making sure you're informed, but then following your own passion. I think that makes it easier to take that first step.
Okay, it sounds like what you're saying is to respect their learning process as individual learners, similarly to how you would want the teachers to respect their students' learning process.
I think that we've got to do that. We've got to honor freedom to our learners and to our teachers. I don't, handing a teacher a new book and a new pacing guide, that to me is not right. I think teachers are artists, and it would, I can't prescribe how you paint your canvas, but we can talk about general things that we're trying to accomplish in this painting process.
Yeah, I think if we were to take that analogy a little further, we could say it would be a bit like handing an artist a paint by numbers book and tell them, here, be creative.
Exactly. Be creative. Paint this by the numbers, and by the way, each number is the color you're supposed to use.
Exactly. I'd say that's a great analogy to. Really
I think you've got something there, Ben. I'm with you on that one.
I don't know a single artist who would love a paint by numbers way to be creative,
No.
and I'm guessing a lot of teachers feel that same restriction.
Right. And then, we have to toe that line, because there may be some that's like, well, that would have really helped me. And so, I think it's also meeting teachers where they are and figuring out, okay, this is where you are. What about just taking that next initial step? What would it be that might help you in this? It might be, who knows what we talk about scaffolding. I think we have to think about that in all areas.
Do you know a website perhaps that people could go to get some resources?
Oh, yeah. A website for resources?
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much live there. It's YouCubed, kind of like YouTube, but YouCubed. .org.
Oh, great.
And we've got lots of free things out there, papers and resources. One of the things that I think is really unique that we do is we look at the research, because I know as a teacher, I didn't know much about the research unless somebody put it in front of me. When I went to the county office, I had a login to a research database, and oh my gosh, I was so thrilled. That's how I learned about Joe Bowler's work. And I had not met Joe, but it grabbed me, and I thought, oh, this is the place to start. You have to start here with mindset and believing in students and getting students to believe in themselves. But then that was cut off because it was too expensive. And I was devastated. And so I think our passion for doing this today is really, we'll interpret it, but we don't just interpret it. We like to include then, what would it mean in the activity? If you wanted to try this, what activity would you go to tomorrow that would, help the students see this and help you yourself see it as a teacher?
Yeah, and I'd say that's probably a big pointing direction of why YouCubed has been so successful and had such a great turnout, is because you give a lot of those real concrete steps and ideas for how to take the next step with some of these big picture research-based ideas.
I hope so, yeah. And I hope that, in all aspects of everything we say is like, well, here's our first go at this. We're going to interpret this and put it out for you. But our goal is that the YouCubians that come to our site will take it, make it greater, and then share it.
Right. And that's the nature of creativity. It always gets better the more people get their hands in on it. Right?
Yeah. I like to say, I can create a math activity today, but just a couple teachers can make it so much better.
Right.
And even student input, then it can really just take off.
Yeah, and I think that's a great parallel for what teachers can do too, because they can offer their students some entries into some really powerful ideas, and the students will help the teacher refine it. So it's not all on the teacher to be the one that creates and refines everything on their own.
You bring up such a great point on many levels with that one, because I think we've been through a system that has kind of denied teachers the ability to feel that freedom, with fidelity to the text and fidelity to the pacing guide and all these other terms that have been put out there that, I think that we have to come back to this and honor it, and we have to honor students' creativity in the classroom, and not only, we have to allow them that freedom of the beauty of mathematics and the creativity of the solution and the thinking that they bring to the table.
Absolutely, and it's so common, I think, and even I'm sure I'm guilty of this from time to time in my own teaching, but underestimating the capacity of what students can do. Oh,
yeah. They are amazing, aren't they?
Absolutely. Do you have a story you can think of a time when a student really surprised you with their capacity?
Oh, gosh, so many. But there's one that really comes to mind. So I started questioning things not that many years in to my first teaching. I was often given the classes that, since I was the new teacher, the classes nobody else wanted to teach.
Right.
And so I learned about, students in these classes that I really hadn't known much about. My student teaching didn't show me into the world of these students.
Yeah.
And so I had a young man that, I pushed them to do what they could creatively to prove the Pythagorean theorem to me.
Okay.
And, just throwing out there, what are you guys going to, some other proof of the Pythagorean theorem, a creative way of showing it. And this young man came in, he had made plexiglass fish tanks, the squares of each side. And he'd made it so you could actually fill them with fluid. And he came in one day with this blue-colored fluid and did that in front of the class. And it was just amazing. And I thought, this is out of the box and nothing I would have expected. I think to have those moments, to be able to have situations where students can have those moments, and then you can see into their world and what makes them happy and makes them feel that they've really contributed, are the best.
Yeah, that's a great story. I'm imagining blue-colored fluid spilling all over a standardized test and the kid failing. Yet they just created the most amazing demonstration of their mathematical understanding.
That blue-colored, fluid could have been everywhere in that classroom that day. I think it actually was.
Yeah.
There were a couple of design improvements that we came up with for the system as we spilled the Kool-Aid or the water, but it's all good.
Oh, that's such a great learning experience.
Mistakes, and our brains were growing, we were learning from them.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like what you just hinted at was the growth mindset. And I know that's a big central piece of what YouCubed does. You think you could give us an explanation of what the growth mindset is for our listeners? Yeah,
what I like to hang on to with that, Carol Dweck's work here at Stanford has been amazing. And as I say, Joe really has taken it and what I call mathized it. And because
what do you mean by that?
Well, saying, okay, so the growth mindset, Carol's, showed this is important. We need to we need to pay attention to this. Students need this. And so Joe's looked at it, and said, okay, what would that mean in the math classroom? And that's something we really strive for today. What do we do with making sure that students have this? And what this is that, one, that they value mistakes and they understand that mistakes are when they're learning, that struggle should be valued. And I think, that's such a shift from mathematics as it's been. It wasn't that way when I was learning mathematics in school. In fact, in college, you make enough mistakes and you're in the professor's office hours enough, and I was told to go home and think about doing something else. I didn't listen, though. One of my many moments of not listening to what I was being told by someone in a position of authority. But I think that's that growth mindset piece is I don't have to get it quickly. In fact, the struggle and the time spent is a learning piece. And if I believe in my potential that I can get there, then, all things can open and I can keep trying. That's where that perseverance comes in. And it's a very important thing. When I hear a lot of times of what teachers wish their students have as they describe it, they may know nothing about mindset, but really what they're describing is a growth mindset.
Wow, yeah. So if you were to point to a student as an example of a growth mindset, is there a story you could give us that sort of illustrates how to use that mindset to approach struggles or problems?
Yeah, I've so many students I could use for that, but my son definitely comes to mind. I've watched him grow up, and he's 27 years old now, but, watched it where he was in a system that didn't really value his learning style, and so many times he was given negative messages. But he persevered. He kept going. He kept trying, knowing that sometimes a door might be closed temporarily, but later he found that he could open it. And today, I was told he would never graduate from high school. He'd never get a high school diploma. This was by the school counselors and those working with me on his IEP plan. And, for many reasons they were saying this. But he did graduate. He did find his own way through the help of many special education teachers and just his own beliefs. But, today he's yet again in college studying to get another degree. Now, he wants to go further in engineering. And I think that's a huge piece to watch him. I have a much longer story for him, and I'm still watching him today. But that's that perseverance. That's you might have said this to me, but I can work around this. I can learn these things. I may not learn it your way, but I can learn this.
Right. Do you think there's a certain amount of trust, or even go as far as to say faith, that is required to be able to believe that your efforts and your struggles are going to lead somewhere productive later on? Yeah,
what is that? I know, I can think of things that people would probably say that is, but that's definitely there, that I can, and that is that I can do attitude. I can work hard enough, and I can do, think about those Olympic athletes right now that are out there. They didn't figure out how to downhill ski yesterday. They've worked many, many, many hours, and some people might say, oh, they're gifted at this or whatever. And I don't like to think of it that way, because they've had hours and hours and hours of practice. And by saying that, oh, they're just a gifted skier, no, that would be taking away from this that they have done, that, given up how many hours on becoming who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's the common sentiment floating around about 10,000 hours to gain expertise and things like that. And when you think about that, 10,000 hours is a long time.
Yeah.
And as you're building up this expertise, this is something that's earned through hard work, through blood, sweat, and tears, through feedback, and more knowledgeable mentors and coaches and things like that.
Yeah.
How do you think that fits into a high school student trying to improve their situation if they're, say, having a hard time in mathematics or not enjoying the process?
I think for so many, they see it as such a closed subject. They see mathematics as this thing that someone gives me the problem, I figure out the answer, and in that figuring out of the answer, I have to do it this way. Right. Something that happened to my son. He'd come home with an F on a test, and he'd have all the right answers, but he wouldn't have done it the way the teacher wanted him to do it.
Right.
He had come up with his own ways, visual ways that worked best for his learning, which were actually incredible. I learned so much from him myself. But I think that so many students don't see it as that, like my son didn't. It was like, well, you do it my way or you're out. And, I think we don't want that for today's learners. I mean, we're in the 21st century. We have some really, really hard problems to solve.
Right.
And mathematics is a vital component of the solutions for those problems. I think we have to help students see that mathematics is something else. It's not this set of procedures. It's not that I want you to sit in that chair and try to be this calculator because I am programming you.
Right.
We have to make it something else. We have to let them see the reality, the 21st century mathematics.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of my old math professors when I was doing my degree in mathematics used to say, if there's any mathematics that a computer can do, it's not interesting to me anymore. And I've really held that with me as the gauge of what is real mathematics and what is calculator work, right? We don't want to build a bunch of human calculators. We have computers for that. We've already built that.
Ben, I want you to open up these speakers so they cover the world and say that again, because everybody needs to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is such a great statement, and it's real. I think, Joe Bowler often uses an example of, talking about being in a dissertation, doctoral dissertation for mathematics, and thinking, oh my gosh, what's being presented here is something that our students in our classrooms wouldn't even recognize as mathematics because it's entirely visual. And I think about that, and how do we, that's another thing of YouCubed, how do we bring these notions of what mathematics is, of what it really is, into our classrooms and let students see that? One of the problems, a Collatz conjecture, is an unsolved math problem, and we've written it into our materials, and we have it up on our Week of Inspirational Math, the free thing. It's in week 3 for middle school and high school. And actually, I think it goes down to grade 3. It's in week 2, sorry about that. But
it'll give people a time to explore
that. Yeah. But it's in week 2, and a teacher the other day pulled me aside and said, I have this student that really isn't so happy in mathematics class, but the Collatz conjecture, we talked about that one day, and it's an unsolved math problem, and she carries the papers around in her pocket folded up, and whenever she has a spare moment, she unfolds it, and she keeps working on these math sequences.
Oh, wow.
And, that's one of those moments of, okay, so this grabbed her. It might not grab every student, but it grabbed her, and it showed her this is something else. Mathematics is not what you might think it is.
Oh, wow. That is such a great statement. I'm going to take a break real quick, and I think that's a perfect time for us to do that. So as we always do on the Modern Education Radio Hour, we'll hear a few songs throughout the hour from our guest's request line so that we can get a little feel for who this person is outside of their intellectual and professional pursuits. And we'll be right back with a little station business, and then back here on the line with Cathy Williams.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
We are coming back here with Cathy Williams in the studio, talking about education, reform, mathematics teaching, and to get us back into the conversation, Cathy, I wanted us to think a little bit about how parents are best able to support their children who are maybe young, budding mathematics students, and they may not have any control over what type of teaching they're getting or what type of textbook and pacing they have to work through. And a lot of parents, I think, are frustrated and sometimes don't know the best way to support their children. I'm curious if you have any thoughts, or if you could give us maybe some first steps of what a parent can do to support their child at any age or stage of learning.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, parents are such an important piece. One of the things, you know, a lot of parents have had a bad relationship with mathematics due to their experiences as a student. And I think, you know, what's really important is to listen to our kids, to pay attention to our kids, but also, you know, as Jo Boaler often says, she says, fake it, parents, because what we know from research is if you don't like math and you talk about how you don't like math and how math is hard and these things, you know, your child's achievement can immediately go down. And I think that, you know, we really have to say, you know, maybe I struggled. That's a great thing to say, and this is how I struggled, but let's talk about it, because struggle is really good. And now we want our kids to have the best mathematical experiences, and there's lots of fun games. We have a place on YouCubed where we talk about different apps and softwares and actual board games and things. Mm-hmm. But I think engaging, you know, your child in the mathematics around you every day and doing it in a positive way. Maybe it's something you can't figure out, or maybe it's something they can help you figure out, or even if it's puzzles. And I know for me, my aunt was a mathematics professor, and she used to bring me, you know, just little wooden puzzles or things to do that were always mathematical, always problem solving. I think playing games with our children is really important. And then the other aspect of it is, if your child's unhappy, have a conversation. You know, what is it? And parents need to be informed. We have a parent section of our website at YouCubed.org, and there's lots of papers there for you to read, because the one thing our children should be should be able to thrive and be creative and be valued, and their voices should be heard. And so always doing mathematics the way you're told and being scripted and these things, that's not productive for mathematical thinking. We really have to think of our children beyond a calculator. Mm-hmm. and provide that. So I would say, you know, there's lots of resources out there. Jo has a great book, Mathematical Mindsets, mm-hmm. That is a great book to read. She has another earlier book, What's Math Got to Do with It? Another one. That one was written for parents as well. So there's lots of resources out there. I would say get informed.
Yeah.
Spend some time on YouCubed.org.
Okay, so we're saying good things parents can do is not talk badly about their own mathematical experiences. Mm-hmm. Just trying to recap here for the audience. Thinking about taking interest in their lives and experiences centered around their math learning, and seeking out the resources and guidelines for ways that they can best interact with and support their kids as they grow up and have to face whatever struggles that they have, and allowing them to face struggle, allowing them to have some of those moments where they're, say, on the tightrope without a net, so to speak, right? Yeah.
One of them, you know, I think about just, you know, if a child's got a problem to work on at home and they're really struggling, and I know as a parent I would often just get frustrated and just want to show my child how to do it.
Right.
Well, just picking a similar problem, and there would be similar ones in whatever they're working on, and doing that one beside them your way.
Right.
So that you can do a compare and contrast. Instead of showing them, do a similar one and let them follow you and kind of try to understand what you're doing, and then try to think about it their own way. I mean, even that is more engaging than just showing them.
Yeah. What about for a parent who maybe has never seen the math their kids are learning, or has no way of supporting them with the technical needs that they have?
I'm sure that's a lot today, right? Because, you know, I know when I was just doing my applied math degree, my aunt, who was was a mathematics professor, was saying, wow, you're doing math that I didn't have to do until my doctoral program. And here I was, you know, just starting out as an undergrad. So I think, you know, that's just real. And it probably should be the case in the 21st century. But, you know, I think it's always, even if you do know it, maybe a great thing to do is to really push it. Well, what do you know about that? You know, what can you show me about that?
Yeah.
What, you know, and drawing pictures and trying to use the visual areas of our minds that, you know, are in the back of the head. And those are really good areas for mathematics and making those connections. So asking him to draw a picture, explain it to you another way, even looking, you know, on the internet for resources. A lot of those videos aren't good when they just tell you how to do it, but
right.
there are some good ones out there.
Right. I really like the piece that you said about just trying, even if you know the answer, not just giving it away, and really trying to get the child or your student, if you're the teacher doing this, get them to explain what they know, get them to explain what they are bringing to the table, because usually their intuition is valid and can be helpful.
Yeah. And then one thing then, which sometimes comes back at you, is, well, just show me how to do it. That's a red flag.
Right. So now I want to talk a little bit about your math reform efforts, right?
Mm-hmm.
We started saying that you are basically a full-time mathematics reformer. You work with a company on Stanford campus, and that is the main focus, right?
Yes, it is. It is a life's work come to this point. I think I've always wanted to work at this level, and all of a sudden I'm living it. Some days I really have to pinch myself and ask myself, is this really real? This is what I wanted, and it's actually happening. How'd that come to be?
Oh, that's amazing. I'm sure we could have a whole hour talking about that process and
yes.
how getting to where our dreams are coming true. And then what, right?
Right.
We need
exactly.
bigger dreams at that point.
Yeah, I have to wonder about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you know if your efforts are getting the results that you're looking for? How do you know if mathematics teaching and reform is happening?
You know, when I was doing this work as a county coordinator in San Diego, one of the things I noticed was when teachers were excited, they were happy to share, and they just wanted to share student work. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing, especially when all that student work looks different. Yeah. You know, when it all looks the same, that's not interesting. Not interesting for anybody, really. But when it looks, you can see that the kids brought something to the table, their own thinking and their own creativity, and maybe they've worked together or on their own. But it's seeing that student work. You know, just earlier today, I was archiving again, the new curriculum books we've put out, Mindset Mathematics, and we're writing grades K through 8, and it's a sit beside any curriculum. It's not a curriculum replacement. But I just saw another picture on Twitter, where a teacher's posting the work their students did, and it was creative, and the kids look so happy.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you walk into a math class and maybe the teacher and the kids don't look so happy?
Yeah.
So I look at student work and just teachers flourishing, and then how much they're sharing when they take something. I was with another group talking about an activity in the 4th grade Mindset Mathematics book, and a teacher immediately looked at it and said, "Oh, this is good, but I could do this." And I thought to myself, wow, that's a better way to do it.
Right.
And so it's hard to measure these things, but I also, there's people who say, well, you got to look at test scores and things like that. Yeah, we see that evidence. We do research at YouCubed. You're involved in some of it, and that's important. But I like the human side of it. I like the actual moment by moment human side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point just looking at the work, because, the old saying, right? The work speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you're describing is that when you see real mathematics learning going on, that the work will speak for itself. It will show what the teacher values. It will show what the students feel empowered to create. And it's all right there in front of you if you just take the time to look, right?
Yeah, and I guess, as YouCubed has grown, we started out with 5,000 followers, and in ed tech standards, people say, wow, if you can get that first 1,000, that's a great marker. And we immediately got 5,000, so I should have been wondering then, wow, what's up? But now today, with approaching 130,000 registered users, and how just the millions of hits to the website, I think that speaks for itself too. That if people like what you're providing, they'll come back. And I know we love to hear the stories at YouCubed. People email us, or we cherish those when we get them in the office. Everybody on the team, we have such an amazing, dynamic team that's working together. That gives us more fuel to the fire that we're kind of sparking.
Yeah, well, it never hurts to have a little motivation to see that the work you're doing is touching people's lives and making a difference. So if people wanted to get involved with helping their school or their classroom or their child's classroom to start to implement some of these reform ideas, if they wanted to, in a nice way, help their students, teachers do something, what can parents do or community members do to support these kinds of changes?
Wow, there's so many things, from offering to have that conversation about how math is in the world that you're in. I don't think children get to see enough of the mathematics that's going on around them in the real world. They often think mathematics is what's in this textbook. So
right.
I think anybody that can share, no matter what their occupation is, how they think mathematically and the different things that they have, I think that's important. I know teachers are always welcoming volunteers, doing open creative math.
Yeah.
It requires sometimes more supplies and more preparation and more things for the students. So offering time, sharing stories. Another one I love right now, is talking about, well, what's the culture of mathematics on your campus? Maybe there's a display place that, we walk around and often I see wonderful art projects and stories, beautifully written stories by students. But where's the mathematics? Where's the culture of this? And even if it's painting 100 chart on the playground outside, helping to do that. Let's try to make it more of a math-friendly, math-creative, beautiful math space at our schools.
Oh, wow, yeah. I mean, fractal art.
Absolutely.
Interesting patterns within times tables that highlight where the primes are and things like that. Those are great visuals to have around the school to show that that's what they value.
Yeah, let's visualize some mathematics and music or whatever.
Absolutely.
Parents, I think, have so much that they can bring to the table and offer to all of us. They're working outside of education usually. Show us something. Help us.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure parents can bring all kinds of new perspectives that can really help young people see the ways math is happening in their lives outside of school. I don't like to call school not the real world and out of school the real world, which is a common thing that's thrown around in our society.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'd say school is still the real world. We are preparing for all the rest of our lives.
Well, maybe that's, a connection. We know everybody out there's doing, has mathematics going on in their daily life. And maybe we all need to sit back and recognize it. It may not look like that textbook mathematics, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be shared and embraced and talked about. We have to do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit here. Well, actually, it's not shift gears. Maybe imagine the end result of all of this. So if you could imagine a world where mathematics education has been completely reformed, changed fundamentally to be accessible for everyone, what would we be doing then in the classroom?
Wow, maybe we'd be solving some of those unsolved math problems, just opening it up, and kids would be coming up with creative solutions for things that require some mathematical thinking. I think even beyond that, we wouldn't see sad faces that don't want to be engaged. I think we would see a creative space with that open learning and that desire to persevere and just keep going. And I've seen that. I've seen that in classes, where the bell rings and kids don't want to leave. Or at lunchtime, they're flooding into a class to talk to a teacher about, something. I mean, teachers create these spaces now.
Right.
I think we just need that space everywhere. And then maybe if you go into Starbucks and you're sitting down and you just want to meet somebody, and you're going to talk about something, maybe if you start talking about mathematics, the other person isn't going to tell you how much they hate it.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, so you're saying in this future imaginary world we've decided that we would love to live in, that people would have a more open disposition towards even thinking about and talking about math in common language and in common occurrences.
Yeah. And math wouldn't be the gatekeeper to something.
Right.
It wouldn't have been something that kept someone from doing something. It would be, either something you've embraced or maybe you've turned away from, but not because you didn't feel you could succeed at it.
Kathy, can you explain a little better what you mean by being a gatekeeper for mathematics, being a gatekeeper for people? What does that mean?
Well, I think, one of my examples is, in the data that I've seen from schools, sometimes students are taking Algebra 1 3 times over just to get past it because they can't take that next class. And then their science placement is dependent on their success in that class. And then Algebra 2 is what you have to have for applying to colleges in California. And, there's all these things. If you can't do this, then you can't do that. And it's set up as this thing you have to get past.
Yeah.
And so a lot of kids are sitting there trying to grind through to get to the other side just to check it off. And it's not a learning subject. It's more of a performing subject. Joe Bowler uses that all the time, and I gravitate to that because it just makes so much sense. They're just doing it to check it off. They're not doing it because they're learning, and it's harmful.
Right, yeah, and access, even past the high school level, when you start to look at college access and majors, you can't get into an engineering major or, I don't know, maybe a medical major or a lot of other things without having achieved a certain amount of mathematics education, and successfully so.
I think today, they've got a task force federally that, to try to help adult learners of mathematics. I mean, how many people out there would sit there, call in and tell us, I'm not doing that because I couldn't get past this, whether it was geometry or algebra 2 or calculus or whatever it might have been. I think there's more stories of that being a gatekeeper than anything else.
Yeah.
I look at our junior colleges, community colleges, and what's going on there, and students are just dying through the math sequence, and then they're dropping out because they think, okay, it's over for me. I can't do this because I can't get that requirement done. That's should not be acceptable.
Yeah,
we need to support people so that they don't see that they realize I can get through this, and we need to change the content so it isn't so off-putting.
Yeah. If there was one class that you could point to that you think maybe stops the most people from moving forward, could you name what that class is?
I think that there's this, well, gosh, and I don't know, Ben, you probably have your own opinion on this. Is it algebra?
I'm curious.
I wonder, I hear a lot of people that algebra just kills them. It kills their, sadly, a whole nother conversation's grades, but, algebra, but oftentimes it's high, maybe it's algebra 2. Or college algebra, something to that algebra word. And when I hear it, I ask people so then people say, we have to fix algebra. Wait, we have to fix algebra. What is algebra is my favorite question, and let's talk about that, because really, and this is, it doesn't have to be that hard.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I've always thought that algebra is the act of taking our intuition and turning it into notation. And I think that's a big problem when someone has the intuition and understanding to be able to do the algebraic thinking, but they can't put that notation down onto the paper and end up failing something that they fully do understand. So
what should we, and what do we value then? Is it that stickler for notation, or are we still diagramming sentences like in English? I don't know. We let that go, didn't we? But in thinking about that piece, then you have to look at the basis of number sense.
Right.
Because if we truly engage students in number sense and what that is, instead of memorizing things and
Could
just
you outline
doing
for our listeners what you mean by number sense?
Yeah, I think of number sense, I often will hear an algebra teacher saying, well, that student isn't ready for algebra because they can't multiply. And I like to say, well, what do you mean by that? And oftentimes what's meant is they don't have their math facts coming out quickly when asked, which, quickly, do we really need to be fast? I'd rather have mathematical thinking than, just memorize speed. And I think people can think mathematically and have it at the rate of memorized speed. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's, I can tell you 3 times 7 is 21, but can I tell you what it really means? It's 3 groups of 7 or 7 groups of 3. And can I draw you a picture? Can I really show you that I truly understand this? I don't think that we value that full understanding of it than just an answer. We have to stop this answer production. Right. I mean, our tools in our hand, our calculators, whatever can do that. We need to expect more from our children.
Yeah, and sadly, I think the testing dynamic turns into, well, we can value things that we can measure, and it's much easier to measure correct answers than it is to measure abstract visual thinking. So that's what we do.
And how much of that testing dynamic is just to keep some people down?
Right.
I think that there's a lot of equity things that come up with, and maybe it's not intended. I don't think people are necessarily out there intending this, but we're devaluing some of our greatest mathematical thinkers with these crazy assessments we try to use to say they don't know mathematics because they didn't perform on this. Really?
Right.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people would agree with you that they don't agree with that.
I hope so.
Yeah. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit. I think this is related, though. I wanted to ask you about the purpose of grading. What does grading do in schools?
Yeah, why do we do that?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't. Other countries don't. And I know in elementary there's a bigger movement now to get away from grades. And, of course, then there's standards-based grading. And what does that mean? And all these things. Why do we do that?
Right.
What do we need a child to know and be able to do to be productive in our society? And we grade them on that? Because what do grades really mean anyway? I know working as a department chair and a math teacher, your grades are all supposed to mean the same thing. Well, what do they?
Right.
I just think this is one of those terms that's ridiculous to me. And yet our system is based on it in so many ways.
Yeah.
And people are focused on what's my GPA instead of what have I learned today?
Yeah, it's almost promoting a culture of comparison where everybody only matters in comparison to how they do to compared to others.
And don't we want people to be productive and happy and feel like they can, move forward and achieve whatever it is that, they're trying to achieve? And boy, the grading thing just has way more negative on people than positive, yet we continue to do it.
Yeah. Well, I hope a few people are listening that have something they can do to change that.
What's that song you just played at the break? Be brave.
Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely
just
necessary when we want to make change.
And then the testing. We try to say, oh, this is how you performed on that test, and so this is your grade, or this is your, performance level. But that was a moment in time.
Right.
I think, there's just so much more.
Yeah, it's so easy to let a bad day become a defining label on a person, and that's never going to be true except for in the eyes of the person who has to live with that label. I
look at, the labels that we play. Those labels do not define our children. Saying an A student in algebra, that does not define you. We shouldn't let it, or even saying, well, I'm a C student. Well, that's not who you are.
Right. Absolutely. So I did promise I'd get you out of here at around a few minutes before the hour, but I wanted to ask you one last question. Do you think, from your perspective, that there are facets of math education that promote gender and race inequality still to this day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there an example maybe you could highlight before you go?
The stories we hear, at YouCubed and people share with us, the women in mathematics trying to, seek a degree or, even a bachelor's degree or higher. There's so many stories we hear. It's tragic to me that, I lived it in the 80s when I was getting my math degree, and I don't understand how it's still out there today. So I think, we have so many indications from studies done that it's real. That there's gender inequity. There is, someone's ethnicity should not define how they're treated, or, and I think I love the report Held Back. And if you're out there, search that. It's a legal report that was done, but, it was done by law firms studying data, and they found absolute racial issues within what was happening in our schools, and they called them out, and the school's like, hey, we're sorry.
Right.
And they said, we're going to fix this. And I'm glad that they're working on fixing it, but I think we need to talk a lot more about this and really look at the research and the things that we do. We may not intend to do them, but there are things that happen that definitely add to this.
Before I let you go, do you want to leave one parting message for those women and people out there that maybe need a little encouraging word?
I guess, it's that growth mindset. You may receive a message, but always, really look behind it. What is the meaning of that? It might look at what it means to you in the moment, but then also try to seek to understand the meaning of the person that said it to you. Because I've found so many times I've been told I can't do something, but that has not defined who I am.
Yeah.
And it's pushing forward, and then also telling your story and sticking together.
Thank you. That is a wonderful way for us to leave off. I want to thank Cathy Williams for joining me in the studio today to discuss math education and math education reform. So thank you one more time to Cathy Williams.
Thanks, Ben.
And we will see you next week with our new guest, which I'll have for you next week. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks for joining me on Modern Education.